So basically etching is intaglio printmaking. Intaglio is like the opposite of relief. Relief, you carve stuff away, the ink goes on what's left. With intaglio, you, one way or the other, more or less carve stuff away, and that's where the ink goes. Or another way to look at it is you make texture, and the texture holds the ink. So the more texture, the more ink. And once you've gotten your texture on your plate, you put damp paper on top so the paper will squish into your texture, and you roll it through a press, and that pushes the paper in, and you get a print. With etching, the way we make the texture is we use a chemical to etch it. And traditionally you would use acid, nitric acid or hydrochloric acid or maybe sulfuric acid. And one of the two main things that makes new grounds, and much less toxic than traditional etching is we don't use acid. We use ferric chloride. Through the window there you can maybe see some kind of grungy looking brown tanks. And those contain ferric chloride, which acts a lot like an acid, but is actually a salt, and so it doesn't eat my flesh the way it eats the metal, or other people's flesh, and it doesn't, it's much easier to deal with in terms of releasing into the environment, and it's just got a lot of pluses that make it safer to work with. So the etching is I make textures, and the main point with that is this isn't engraving, so I don't need to carve anything. There's not a lot of, other than filing the edges of the plate, I don't have to do hard, like heavy physical carpal tunnel sort of labor. It's much more a chemistry sort of thing. And at the basic level, I have a plate, and I put a coating on it, and you can kind of see this faint blue sheen over the copper plate. That's the new ground. The traditional ground is a asphaltum hard ground. It's beeswax and tar. Kind of smells like if you get your roof redone, if you have a flat roof or even a pitched roof with tar on it. Takes a lot of solvents to clean it off, but that's how etching goes back to the 1500s, and that's traditionally up until even now. It was coated with that, and you draw through that. It's a beautiful, rich, soft, brown, waxy, oily. It's kind of gorgeous in a lot of ways, except for the smell of the stuff to take it off. And we've replaced this with basically floor wax. So it's an acrylic, and instead of having to use a solvent to take it off, I just use washing soda, soda ash, sodium carbonate. And at the simplest form, I just draw on this plate, and I have a needle. I'm going to pass this around here, and I can draw just as I would draw with a pen, basically, like pen and ink. And I'm not pressing hard. I'm just drawing enough to break the surface. And at this basic, simple level, anything you can do with ink and pen on a paper, you can do with etching. So etching's fun because it's really simple in some ways. It's also almost infinitely complicated. So you can go, I've been doing it for 24 years now, and I'm not bored with it yet. And I get bored of things really, really fast. So that's kind of amazing. Some other things, so this is line etching. This is what Rembrandt did, this is what Albrecht Dürer did, this is what Whistler did. Over the centuries, some other techniques got invented. I can spray the ground on with an airbrush and get kind of tonal areas. I'm going to pass this plate around, maybe going the other way here. And that's called aquatint. And that plate, if you feel the texture on the plate, that rough kind of almost sandpapery, that's aquatint, and that's going to hold ink in a broad sort of flat color area. And when I've got everything drawn on the plate I want on it, I go and I submerge it into the tank for 5 to 30 minutes, and that etches the lines, and then I have the texture. With the aquatint, same thing. I block out things I don't want to etch. I spray on the resist. I etch it. I get those tonal areas. There's sort of three parts of the etching. There's this creative part with making the plates, and then there's a creative part with playing with the colors, and then there's this, for me, not very creative part of printing them, because I'm just printing them, but for some people that's also a creative part because they make each print different and change something every time. This plate, the one that went around that was the aquatint plate, this in the original image in the gallery is the blue. It's water. It's the ocean around the island. Incidentally, this island is the island of Fugloi. It's the northernmost Faroe Islands where I spent all of July 2013 and a chunk of July 2014. They're a chunk of islands up between Norway and Iceland, settled by Vikings back around 900 and occupied by descendants of those Vikings, and it's a wonderful place. And this island was sort of the crux of the trip, so it shows up in a lot of prints. So I did it blue before. I'm going to do it orange this time, because in consultation with our intern Manuel, that seemed like it'd be the funnest thing to do. So the opposite of blue. So step 2, I've got the ink all smeared around here, and now I take this tarlatan, it's kind of like cheesecloth, and I'm going to, at this point, this is where the magic of intaglio happens, and the ink is wiping off anywhere that's smooth, which in the case of this plate is pretty much the island and the house, and then wherever there's texture that's holding onto the ink. And one of the beautiful things about etching, well, first of all, just the inks look really nice on the copper. Copper's pretty to begin with. Blue's especially pretty on the copper. But I mean, you saw when I passed it around, it's not etched very deep. But you get a lot of richness and detail without having to have chunky lines. And there's not a lot of limits to what you can do. And then I'm going to finish with a wipe with some newsprint, just to kind of even out any smudges. Probably got more mess on the back than I would normally, because caulking and wiping don't always go together. Them on top. So I'm going to move over here, I'll kind of shift, and I'm going to come to this press which decided to actually print. And our presses all have a grid on them, and I'm going to use that grid to make sure that my plate goes in the same place every time. Because what I'm going to do now is put these plates down one at a time, run them through the paper on top, and then switch the plates out. So I've got some paper I prepared earlier, because I need the paper to be damp to best receive the ink. Those are extras just in case. So right now we're going through with the yellow. And then do I get my cranker? Ever had you be the cranker when you were younger? No? Well, now's your chance. Go ahead and put that down there. And other way. Face that way. And I think you want to lift it up towards you to start out. Here we go. You're on. Go as fast or slow as you like. It doesn't make a difference. I'll tell you when to stop. So, hundreds and hundreds of pounds per square inch, pushing that paper into that texture. That's good, thanks. So magic moment 1. So you can see there's kind of an emboss. That's how heavily it is pressing. You can see the plate pushing through the paper. And like I said, I have to keep things in the same place. So I've got this lead brick to hold the paper down. Oh, thank you. So here's the yellow. So if you're over there, you want to come around and take a look, because we're going to cover it up with some orange momentarily here. And I'm going to flip that back, and I'm going to... So now we're going to do the orange next, going from darkest to lightest. And I'm putting it in the same place on the grid I had before. Usually I try to have something where if that thing lines up, it's all good. In this case, it's the tree up the middle. There's so many more children at these things. But fun stuff starts to happen in terms of the layering of the colors, because they're a little bit transparent, so you get some combinations that wouldn't happen with the ink on its own. And this part I have to go kind of rapidly because I don't want my paper to dry out before I get done. Now I can lift it up and we'll do a little.
Beautiful.
So kind of in many ways totally different from the one in the gallery.